goodness, who would have thought when I went to Zurich to see a screening of the James Bond movie 3 weeks ago, and then caught a train to Geneva, partly to meet Michael Adams here, that I'd be introduced to Mehdi and find myself here. Certainly, should he still be capable of looking either down or up at me, my great-great-grandfather, who was part of a family that ran a ship's chandlers, a ship's supplies business in Port Glasgow, a little further down the Clyde, who left Port Glasgow in 1837, emigrated with the entire family to the other side of the world. I wonder what he would make of me by happenstance as much as by contrivance, being part of something so very important as this. Now, I am the most, sometimes people speak of the smartest man or woman in the room. I am the stupidest and least informed. Why is that? It's not that ESG and associated ideas, particularly as they're applied to investment, are unknown to me. But Ship Zero? Well, what a wonderful panic-stricken introduction I've had to it. I've been reading up about it for the last 3 weeks, and this is important stuff. Now, with me are three real experts. Their names are all in the program. Diane Gilpin, Nynke Visser, and also Andrew Smith, and they're going to each present to you for 6 minutes, and then they're going to be doing this in very different directions in a way, and then we're going to try and pull it all together and address our topic through questions from you, and there's going to be a workshop after this. I'm not going to speak for much longer, but I will say that the biggest question to me around all of this is not the superficial one that might lead to someone like me saying to you, well, get real when you're going out to raise money. It's no good just having a dream, an idea, a team, or even some kind of plan, or even what you think is something that makes you distinctive. Because in the end, whether they're public sector or private sector, people who can provide you with funding, particularly when you're early stage or early growth stage, they are faced by so many propositions that they are forced to find reasons not to back you. It's not because they're negatively minded, it's not because they're per se conservative, something that the banks are often accused unfairly often of being. It's simply they can't back everything. And it would be very easy for us to give you the message, just get real. On the other hand, not least because of what's going on here in Glasgow right now, the zeitgeist, the moment really is with you. You're never likely to get more positive sentiment that would make people responsive to what you can take to them. That's number one. And number two, it is said that there's something of a feeding frenzy around different technologies around the world right now, not least in Europe. On the other hand, if it was that simple, we wouldn't have this panel. And I'm going to hand over without further ado, I think to Andrew first, then Diane, and then Nynke. Thank you very much.
Sure, thank you very much indeed. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Andrew Smith. I'm delighted to be here. I've just got two or three slides, but just to frame this, I'm talking about early stage technologies, and I'm talking about how I think they can help you do what you want to do. And what I would like to say is, first of all, I am hugely encouraged by what I've heard this morning from your sector, from those funding and financing your sector. And I think there are some real practical things that we can have emerge today and be part of MADA's white paper going forward. This is a slide which is a bit of a compulsory slide when you do these things of me and my colleagues. We are around the world, and I'll only hang on to this one for a short while too, but just to frame what I do, we help early stage technologies, clean technologies always, get funded, but also get adopted into the marketplace, which is where, that piece there is where I think your sector and many of you can help us do what we do, which typically is in the early equity space. I put some of the things on this slide that we do, that we're involved with. just to demonstrate how seriously people like us, who are kind of at the bottom of the funding, financing, equity kind of food chain, if you will, how seriously we're being taken now. Steve Luna, who's here today, who has a great hydrogen technology, and I tomorrow are sitting with Wood, Siemens Energy, and one or two other really big businesses talking about this stuff. And that's a really good sign, I believe. So we heard a little bit about time this morning. We heard a lot about time this morning, actually. Time to net zero. I heard somebody say it's 1 billion seconds to 2050. How frightening is that? 1 billion seconds. I mean, somebody will check that out right now, probably on Google, and tell me I'm wrong, but I think it's right. One of the other frustrations that we have, and myself and colleagues speak to the venture arms of all the big corporates all the time, BP, Chevron, Shell, all of these, Total, now Total Energies, and of course that very famous company, Statoil. Oh no, sorry, Equinor, of course now. So we talk to them all the time, and you know, some of the things they say to us are astonishing. But bearing in mind that these are VCs leading the charge for new technology, they say to us things like, well, listen, if that technology ends up being good enough, we'll just buy it. That can't happen anymore. Those VCs, those family offices, those funders, they need to get involved. The way the lending community can help, and debt money is not right for early stage technologies, we know this, but the way they can help for sure is by getting the messaging out that emerged from me for the first time this morning, and that's my fault, not yours, which is there's real demand here. There's demand for technologies, and we, as the providers of debt, are shaping our debt products now to incentivize the adoption of new technologies and clean technologies. Because I can use that. When I go to investors, I can say, look, these guys here who are providing the money are telling their own customers who are borrowing the money that they need to decarbonize. And here's the technology. So there's a piece of the conversation I'm no longer responsible for. And the more that we can weave into these principles that we hope will emerge from today and will be a living document, the more we can weave that in, the more we can ask different stakeholders around here to do what is possible. Don't ask them to do things that are impossible. Nothing will happen. To do what is possible, the more we can do that, the better. So one of the things that we try to do is understand the drivers, and we've talked about them quite a lot this morning. I'd just like to pick out a couple here. I was in Amsterdam last week at a big ocean engineering conference, and I heard in the margins of that the largest publicly owned pension fund in Holland has announced that they are divesting from Shell. Now, this is kind of like if the late Prince Philip were still alive, it's kind of like he and the Queen saying they're getting divorced. That's what a big deal that is in Holland. And the reason they're doing that is because Shell, of course, is still heavily a fossil fuel business. And if you understand that as a small technology developer, you can then help Shell with the problems it's got in solving those problems by coming up with a technology that helps it to decarbonize. We're also doing work in electrifying the ocean's basins, which is there is a big ask, and that's where some of the stuff we do touches directly onto the shipping sector, where many journeys to drop off equipment and subsea vessels burning bunker fuels are going to become unnecessary. I think the shipping sector can hopefully join us as we go down that road. And the other thing I'd like to mention in opening remarks here is the role of regulation. Coming down the track is electrification of ports to enable them to have ships in port using electric power. That electrification regulation is a great trigger for infrastructure investors. They would love to invest in that stuff. I'm absolutely sure, because it's long term. It's there. There's a driver for its use. So, just a few opening remarks from me. I would like to concentrate in the chat afterwards on the stakeholders and who does what. I think we could maybe discuss that in the panel. And what I would like to do now is just say, well, let's get on with it. Thanks very much.
Okay, and I think that you've raised a couple really interesting points that have been drawn to my attention. The importance of land infrastructure, and maybe in APG's divestment is the germ of an idea to persuade them to put some sort of pool together, maybe in tandem with the other Dutch schemes like PGGN. But that will take high-level contacts, and that's something that's often missing from the early-stage funding equation, actually knowing where to go and who it is appropriate to approach for different levels of funding, different levels of intervention. Now, I'm going to hand over to Diane now, please.
Hello. I am going to talk about how we've been trying to just get on with it for about 10 years, and how the funding gap that we experience between feasibility and scale is really holding back the opportunity to decarbonise this industry in line with IPCC recommendations. This is a climate emergency. I am going to talk about time, and it is something that we need to be addressing very, very quickly, and we have a plethora of technologies, not only in shipping but in other areas, where we can start to decarbonise very quickly. But we all seem to suffer from this problem, this gap between feasibility and scale. And I think it's a market failure. I'm not asking here for 1.6 million, although if you have it, that would be great. What I'm really about is what I'm really about is trying to find a way that we can fix this, because this is a climate emergency. So I'm going to attempt to do a bit of technology and show you a film. Have I done it? So we actually made that for Andrew's event, which we are presenting at on next Tuesday, which is called 26 for COP26.
Dan, can I just see if that is a
You can.
that is
Thank you. So you can see we've been working on this for a number of years. We have demonstrated through collaboration that we can save at least 20% emissions on a specific ship, on a specific route, working with a big cargo owner, working with naval architects, fantastic people from Malin, and we've had a lot of government support. Now, a lot of people will tell me they're going to ask for for government support is a begging bowl. But we've heard during this conference over the last couple of days that there just isn't an availability of easy funding for these areas where there are quite a lot of easy wins to be had. And I believe that there is an issue here with the way that we're funding an entrepreneur. And so when we talk to gap investors, they think that we are this sort of person. They think that we're driven entirely by machismo and competition and profit and living in a super yacht for the rest of our lives. And I think what we are experiencing, what I'm experiencing, I think what Andrew's experiencing, is that there's an emerging group of climate entrepreneurs. And what happens when we start to talk to some of the sectors of the market is that we're deemed to be tree huggers. And we're not. We're looking at driving down climate emissions as a currency, but also making shitloads of money while doing it, because we're on the cusp of a wave. So I don't think that getting government support is really the begging bowl. We have been the beneficiary because this is a societal problem, and that's what governments are here to do, to help challenge and support activities that address societal challenges. And so we've been really benefiting from this government activity, and we're really being tremendously well supported by Scottish Enterprise at the moment in getting this pilot project into the water. The difficulty that we're having is that that system that exists can only be unlocked if we get private match funding. And we have talked to 150 organisations, some of whom have been put forward to us by Scottish Enterprise, some of whom have been put forward to us through our own fantastic network of top-class fundraisers. And we get a very clear answer, and we've heard it already today. There's 1,000 ways to say no, 50 ways to say no, 50 ways to leave your lover, whatever you want to call it. But everybody is rational. There's nobody that's going, Di, this is absolute rubbish, get out of my life. If they did that, then that might make my life a bit easier, because I could just go and do my gardening. But everybody says no, and that's kind of weird, because we know Scottish Enterprise have done due diligence till it hurt to be able to give us the Scottish Enterprise support in the first place.
Now, Di, this is precisely one of the lines I think we'll pick up on.
Yeah, well, I'm going to talk about an
during the
emergency.
Q&A.
I'm going to talk about an emergency. We know, and somebody made the point earlier, we know what an emergency funding looks like. We know that we're not looking at the risk that the IPCC are telling us to look at. We know that we can respond in an emergency in the way that we have for COVID. And if you ask any of the naval architects in this room, we know that Merchant Marine can also do it. Ask about Liberty ships. It's the most extraordinary story in the world. So we live, along with hundreds of other promising technologies, in this awful, awful gap where we're just languishing, looking for money. Tiny amounts of money.
Why don't we pick up on this?
Because I haven't finished, I've got 2 seconds to go. $11 million a minute being funded into the fossil fuel industry. Imagine if we could release that to prospect for real green solutions in the short term and start to address the issues that are going to be coming out of that building over there. Thank you very much.
Nynke, just before you start, Di raises some really interesting points there. For example, the image in the wider world, outside of this room, that it's all about tree hugging. Actually, it's about the most historic set of opportunities to raise productivity in the general economy and for everyone to make money out of it, to get better off through their incomes, or if they're investors, to get a return on their capital. And that's something that's often left out of the public discourse on this. It's not just about, you might say, I'm trivializing it, I'm not. It's not just about saving the planet, it's also because the economy itself is going to benefit enormously if the money is mobilized behind all of this. So it is pragmatic as well as idealistic, to go back to what Michael was saying at the beginning of the day. Over to you, Nynke.
Thank you. Oh, yes, you can hear me well. Good morning, everyone. My name is Nynke Visser. I'm the owner of Innivity, and I'm very glad to be here. Thank you very much, Maddie, for having me here as well. And I loved your speech, Diane. So Innivity is about connecting people to reach infinite sustainability. And it has already been discussed earlier how powerful collaboration can be. And I think that is just what you and we all need. So today I will share with you the power of co-creation to accelerate the implementation of sustainable innovations. And I will do that by using an example. Yesterday, Danielle also shared an example, Sail Cargo. I was truly impressed. I really loved the idea. And I will tell you a different example. And it was recently done in Holland, and I think we can all learn from that, from a process-wise perspective. So it's a kind of a different angle. So one question, does anybody recognize this ship? If you do, please raise your hand. Okay. Maybe it helps if I tell you that the cargo on the ship is a lot of beer. And the star, oh, you can't see the star. There's also a star on the front of the ship who's actually linking it to the brewer that's involved. So would you then have an idea? If you know it, then please stand up. It's also good for your energy. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah. Oh, good, you know. Thanks. So the company behind this is Heineken. So this ship is called the Alphenaar, and it's sailing from the brewer, close to the brewer. There's Alphen aan de Rijn, and from Alphen aan de Rijn to the port of Moerdijk, this vessel is actually sailing, and it's now sailing emission-free. Because on this ship, there's a ZESTA, it's called. And it's a battery-powered container, including lithium-ion batteries, and it's sailing on solar and on wind energy from the Holland. So it's actually sailing since last September. So hooray for that. But what Heineken did with this, we can do too. Of course, maritime industry is much more complex and other solutions are applying. But I'll tell you what we need to make this happen. So it all started with a dream. In 2013, Heineken pitched a dream because they had the dream of becoming a climate neutral brewer. And they pitched this dream across a large audience. And they were so convincing that they convinced the Wageningen University and also the province of South Holland. So that's the governmental part. And what the province of South Holland and the university did is that they added to the dream of Heineken. So they stepped on board, basically. And by that, a new concept was born. It was called Green Circles, where knowledge institutions, businesses, and governmental parties are actually collaborating to reach a sustainable dream. And it actually turned out to be quite a success, because this initial circle, it became, there were more sub-circles created. For example, combating beer mortality, or a sustainable supply of energy supply, but also emission-free goods transport, and much more. So the concept turned out to be a success because of this dream, parties were able to go beyond their limited interest, and look beyond their limited interest, and look at it as from a bigger picture. So they could together work with a shared action plan and look beyond the boundaries. And that gave them a lot of perspective. So now I'll show you what resulted in terms of shipping. So what you see here is the ZESTA, which I called upon before. And from the sub-circle, the green, the emission-free goods transport, in 2020, a company was created. And this company was called Zero Emission Services, also a member of ZESTA. And this company was founded by ING Bank, by the Port of Rotterdam, by Engie, an energy company, and Wärtsilä, a technology provider. But they were not on their own, because they were supported by the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. And their first client was Heineken with their shipper cargo terminals, CCT. So what happened is that they worked together. It was not always easy, but together they made this work. And the ZES concept is that the company itself does the investment in the battery-powered container. The client only pays for the use that the use of the electricity. And it's being charged, it's modular, as you can see. In 15 minutes you can swap the batteries on the ship, and it's, at this moment it's the focus on the inland shipping. But it actually works. And that's quite impressive, because showing that this works is not only showing that battery-powered can happen, you hear that much more often, but it shows that the green circles actually can result in a system change, because this is actually going to change inland shipping. For at this moment, inland shipping, hydrogen is way too expensive. In the future, you can put hydrogen in this battery container, by the way. But it's actually changing the way that inland shipping is behaving, and you can just now sail emission-free, which is pretty awesome, I can say. So what I learned yesterday is that we have the technology, but what do we do now? I think cooperation is key. It's what was mentioned by Diane as well. It's like you need to cooperate, governmental parties, knowledge institutions, businesses, and I like to add a fourth, which is financiers. If you bring those 4 parties together, then magic happens. You can't do it alone, and together you can actually make this work. So then the question remains, what is your ambition? Because you need to make it concrete, and if you can make it concrete, find parties that are willing to add to your dream, and then actually collaborate and make it happen. So thank you very much. It has been a pleasure to be here and to tell you the story. Thank you.